Education is the key to a bright future.
Yeah, we'll talk about formative feedback activities, so Moodle quizzes, basically. What we're going to do today is we'll look at formative feedback and why it's important, to start with. And then we'll look at different levels of quiz questions and how to apply them. And then we're going to go through different types of Moodle quiz questions that we have available and that we can work with. And we'll talk a bit about sort of general guidelines of do's and don'ts, what to do when writing quiz questions. And I'll also give you kind of examples and things to keep in mind when writing quiz questions. And then it's your turn. I hope we'll have time for this, and you'll be keen to do that as well. We'll work in small groups and discuss and design some quiz questions, and then later on we'll talk about this as well. Yeah, so that's my plan for today. Let's get started with thinking about feedback in general. So just so we're all on the same page and know what we're talking about. So there's a difference between formative and summative feedback. What's the difference? So summative feedback on the right, these are basically unit tests and assignments and exams and tests, and they're high stakes because they're usually marked, so that it has consequences, how well a student does on this, and they're usually a one-time activity, so only get one chance, or maybe students can retake the tests or the summative feedback opportunities, and they're evaluative, so they look at what a student or whether or not a student has met the course objectives and the learning objectives. Formative assessment, however, these are, for example, practice activities or quizzes, like we're talking, or what we're going to talk about today. So all these Moodle quizzes that are not part of the unit tests, of the final assignments, they're formative assessments, and they're low stakes. They're more like diagnostic. They look at where the gaps are, and then ongoing activities, so students can do that all the time, again and again. And they're an essential part of the learning process. And because they help students take control of their own learning and to become self-regulated learners. So I just wanted to make this differentiation clear, because today we're going to talk about the formative side of assessment, of feedback of assessment. So formative feedback, formative assessment, not about exams. There will probably be a second part of this webinar later on in a couple of weeks, where we'll talk about tests, so unit tests and assignments, and how to evaluate them. But today is only going to be about formative assignments, so practice opportunities for students, formative feedback. And let's quickly think about why feedback actually is so important in learning. So it really doesn't matter what sort of approach to learning and how learning works you take. I've just pulled out one of my favorite approaches, is experiential learning, that is based on students having a concrete experience and reflecting about it, abstracting, experimenting, which then leads to another concrete experience. And there's feedback, or whenever there's an experience and students are actually doing something and experimenting, there's going to be feedback from the external world, and that leads to learning and improvement. But also if you come more from the learning design and how to structure a lesson side of things, quite popular, or quite well known are these 9 events of learning, and this is more about how to structure a lesson, usually to be optimally effective. So you start with sort of gaining attention, and then you talk about objectives and look at prior learning and so on. But feedback, before you actually get to the assessment side of things, so to the summative assessment side of things, feedback plays a crucial role. So feedback plays a crucial role in learning, especially so in online learning. And I came across the other day a really interesting study, which I have a little screenshot here of, and it looks at how people learn from YouTube videos. We all do it. And what I found so interesting about the study is what they found is that People who watch a YouTube video to gain a skill and to learn a skill. I think they had sort of like playing darts and playing the ukulele and doing the moonwalk. When they watch these videos without actually practicing themselves, they're quite confident that they can master the skill. But when they then tested these people who were really confident that they would master playing darts or doing the moonwalk, they weren't that good at this task. So there's a huge gap between what people think they can do after consuming instructional videos and what they can actually do. Yeah, and this gap has to be filled with activities, with actually doing the skill or the task that they're learning themselves and getting feedback. And I think this is a really good point, especially for online learning, because oftentimes students think, I'm just going to watch a video and then I can do it. Yeah, that's not how it works. Yeah? So I think that was very, very pertinent to what we're going to talk about today. And of course, the role of feedback, we can't forget that feedback also plays a big part in motivation. Yeah? I mean, we all know Duolingo, probably, learning a language with Duolingo, the mobile phone app, and it's so attractive, to be tested, to do tests and then get feedback, and of course, if the feedback is positive, that's even better, but sort of any feedback is great, and it's really motivating, and of course, also this gamification aspect, we all obviously like to get a task and then get it right, so. That also plays a crucial role. But how much feedback do students need? Yeah? And for Empowerment First, we say that sort of 30% of the course content should be theory. Yeah? That includes examples. Yeah? So videos, text on page, examples, and the other 70% should be feedback or should be opportunities for feedback. And these are made up of practice and application activities. And these are assignments and quizzes. So actually the feedback part of a content that we develop of the courses is 70%, so plays quite a crucial role. And another thing to keep in mind when we design quizzes or feedback opportunities for students is that there are different levels of learning, of depth of learning. So we that's also quite well known. It's the Bloom's taxonomy. So you can aim at students learning or remembering things, remembering facts, understanding stuff. Then the next levels are applying and analyzing stuff. So that's a bit higher level. These are different skills. And the highest levels are evaluating something and creating new things. So transferring their skills, their knowledge to new contexts. And this model actually works quite well to what we at Empowerment First say our quizzes should aim at or should focus on. So sort of about a third of our quiz activities, or of our feedback activities should aim at memorization. So only a third. We'll later look at how difficult that actually is. To just keep it to around a third. And another 30% roughly should focus on application. So how to apply the content. And around 40% should be focusing on should be at the highest level. Should be at mastery skills, which is transferring skills to contexts. Obviously, these numbers are sort of just rough guidelines. But I think they give a good overview. What does that mean? So for each level, or for in each quiz, for each unit, or lesson, for each quiz or each unit of learning that we design, we should aim at all three levels. And for each level, there should be 10 to 20 questions, roughly. So quite a high volume of questions, because we want to give students lots of opportunity to practice. 70% of the whole learning time should be dedicated to practice opportunities to getting feedback. So each level, roughly 10 to 20 questions. And of course, within each quiz, it makes sense to start with the easier questions, the questions that aim at memorization, then move on to questions that aim at application, and at the end have questions that aim at mastery level. Yeah, so it makes most sense to, or it doesn't make any sense to ask vocabulary questions at the end of a quiz when you had sort of like a video and listening comprehension questions first. Yeah, so we should aim at this sort of level of scaffolding, going from easy to more difficult. Yeah. And yeah, I've got some examples for you, just to illustrate that. Yeah, and lots of examples today will come from language learning because that's my background, that's stuff I know. Yeah, so for example, in foreign languages, memorization, or a question aiming at memorization at the lowest level, could look like this: an image, and you ask students, what is this? And they just have to recall the word for that thing that they see. Yeah, that's a basic memorization question. Application could look like this. They have a sentence, and they have to understand that sentence in order to find the word that fits here, and probably the only word. Yeah. You can see I live in an building, in apartment. Yes, it has to be apartment, not flat. Yeah, for example, the US version, not the British version, for example, as well. And a transfer question. So this is all sort of very basic language learning, very beginner's level. Yeah? And the transfer at the mastery level could be, for example, a video in which someone describes how they live. Someone describes their home, and students need to listen to that and then decide, where does this person most likely live? And they have several options. And they're most likely, from what they've heard, most likely they live in a house, in a small apartment with friends or with their parents. So these are just three very simple examples to illustrate how, on the same sort of topic, we can still have the three, and at a very, very basic level, at a total beginner's level, we can still have the three different levels. In our little breakout room activities later on, I'll also ask you to look at this or think about this. How can you design quiz questions for different levels? Okay, let's look a bit closer or more closely at the types of quiz questions that Moodle offers us. And there's you'll have access to the presentation later on as well, so you have the hyperlinks as well. So if you open a quiz and say add a question, you get asked, or you get this window, and you have to check or decide which type of question you want to use. We're going to look at most of those, not all of those, but most of those today. But I'll talk you through them more or less quickly. But first of all, let's look at sort of some general guidelines for all types of quiz questions. And I'd say the most important thing before you start writing a quiz is to consider, well, what is it that I want my students to learn with this quiz question that I'm about to design? What do I want them to learn, to practice? And I think once you've decided that, instead of, and I'm saying this, instead of going, I've got this content here and I'm just going to copy and paste and make some quiz questions out of it, not ideal. Think about what you want students to actually practice, to learn. What skill do you want them to practice? And also at what level do you want to be? Memorization, application, or transfer? And I think once you've decided on this, a lot of stuff will fall into place. An important aspect of designing quiz questions is give clear instructions. It might seem, or you might think, well, it's obvious what students need to do here. No, it's probably not. It's probably not obvious. Never assume. So, for example, and students, students might already be in their second year or something. But still, it's good practice to tell them what you want them to do. What is the actual task for this quiz question? For example, here they're supposed to match what's on the left side. So these are foods to a category on the right side. And I'm also telling them, careful, there are two more answers than you need, which is nice to tell students, so that they don't wonder, what is this? Why are there more? And what do I do with the rest of them? So give clear instructions. That's another example. so you have in multiple choice questions, you can have either one correct answer or several correct answers, and it's good practice to tell them what type of question that is. And also here, tell them that they're supposed to pick the one that's not, that doesn't fit in. It's also good practice to do that. Another thing, and maybe that's mainly a language thing, might be, so tell me if that doesn't apply to your field, but be mindful that oftentimes with multiple choice or with these types of questions, what you're going to do is present wrong answers. So you have wrong content for students to look at probably for quite some time. So be mindful of that. And oftentimes it's not, you can't avoid it, but be mindful that this is what you're going to do. For example, here, instead of just asking what is the right spelling, it might probably be much better to and then have different options, and that of which 4 are wrong, and you don't want students to remember. It might be a better idea to give them some context, so they have to actually apply that, and then maybe give them just a part of the word, and so that they try not, or that they don't look at these wrong spellings for a long time, and might memorize something that they're not supposed to memorize. And also, it's always good to give some context, instead of just asking what's the right spelling, for example. What else? Always provide feedback or explanations. That's super important. Again, these quizzes are all about feedback. So it's super valuable for students if for every question that you're asked, you also provide feedback. For example, here. I picked the wrong answer, and it says the feedback is the answer is not correct, and then an explanation. And you can also add a hyperlink to the lesson where this content was covered. So students can click on that, or you can add some additional materials, online materials, for example. That you can send students to. How do you do that? If you open a quiz question, there's the combined feedback, and you can create a hyperlink for any text that you have in there. And it's actually good practice to also do that, not just for wrong answers, but maybe also for correct answers. Because if you're creating the feedback for the wrong answer already, you might as well just add it to the correct answer as well, just to reinforce and explain. Because students might just have picked this by chance, by accident, and you want to give them some feedback on why this answer is actually correct. Or they might have sort of felt that this might be the right answer, but don't actually know why. So it's good practice to also give them some feedback and context, even if the answer is correct. Make use of media that you can use here. You can add images, videos, audios, and lots of different media to the question. For example, here quite a simple question: fact or fiction? So is that what is this? But you still have, but it's based on an image. Avoid ambiguity. Is one of my pet peeves as well. So try to avoid ambiguity. What I mean by this, for example, here this is just an excerpt from some terms and conditions from a website. And it says in the text, so what these terms and conditions apply to is your rights, the right of the users, all rights, and the rights of third parties. So several different options, several different people this applies to. And then the question is, read the statement and decide, is that true or false? And the statement is, the individuals whose rights these terms and conditions apply to or protect are users of the site and third parties. So these are just 2 aspects of the 4 aspects that are mentioned in the text. And as a student, I would wonder, well, is this true or is this false? Because the 2 aspects are true, but that's not all of it. So try to avoid ambiguity and try to maybe see it from the student's perspective when you design a question. So the question should be very clear and have a clear answer. So that's sort of general guidelines. Let's look at some specific question types. As I said, not all of them, but I'll just focus on the main ones, because oftentimes any sort of comments I have here would also apply to other types of questions. Yeah? But let's start with the most popular, probably multiple choice. Yeah? So I think I said earlier as well that there are single versus multiple correct answer multiple choice questions. Yeah? So you can have several questions or several answers that are correct that students are supposed to select, or just one answer, one correct answer. Again, it's good practice to tell them which one it actually is, that you want them to do. I mean, they can see that from the boxes, because the multiple options are square and the single options are round. But still, it's good practice to tell students what they're actually supposed to be doing. If that's too annoying for you, Moodle actually has a little option here where you can say show standard instructions, and it will add that for you, which is actually quite handy. It will say something like select all or select one. And since we have that, since we have the options of selecting several or having several correct options and only one correct option, we probably all know these kinds of questions, which really annoy me. The all of the above, which A, doesn't make any sense to actually offer this as an option, because we have select several. So, and also the problem there is if you add in all of the above and forget to deselect the shuffle answers, then you get something like this, where all of the above is, for example, in the first position, and then it doesn't make any sense anymore. Yeah. Okay. How many answer options? How many are enough? So difficult to. It's not. There's not a black and white answer. It's not an easy question. But 2 is probably not enough. Because 50-50 chance. So you should probably have 3 or more answers. 3 or more answer options to make it difficult. And obviously, the more answer options there are, the more difficult it will be. But I'd argue that there's probably also a line to draw when there are too many answer options. For example, here, as soon as students will have to scroll down, and also considering that students many will access the content on their phones, that if they have to scroll down to read all the answers and then have to scroll up again to read the question, that's probably might hinder the effectiveness of this whole activity. Also here, I mean, why do you want students for this activity? Why would you want them to select 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 correct answers and leave out one that's not correct? It's probably a better idea to do it the other way around and say which of these is not edible. So I'm not going to say, I don't know, like 6 answers is the maximum or something, but it depends. But usually it's not. There's not an unlimited number of answer options. There's probably a limit at some point, where it doesn't make any sense anymore. Another important aspect is all answer options should be equally plausible. So here, for example, you want students to identify the word or remember the word for this fruit, which is an apple. But the answer options, only one of them is different. Find the odd one out. That would rather be an activity for that. Find the one that doesn't match. Because there's only one that has an article and the other that is a noun. And the others are different types of words. So that would probably be quite easy. And it's not testing whether the student can, or it's probably testing whether the student can remember the word for this, but it's not testing whether the student can discern that word from other words, or that option from other options that are similar. So all answer options should be equally plausible. Another example for this is this, for example, how to write or what should a summary look like? What is a summary? And the summary, or the second option, B, is a summary. I'll write a summary in a secret language that I make up. It's obviously not correct. I hope that every student would get that. Obviously, sometimes we want to add in, just for a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of fun, a fun answer option. That's fine, but just keep in mind that if you have answer options in there that are obviously not correct, yeah, you limit or you reduce the complexity of the question, yeah, because that means, okay, if I can totally eliminate one, there's 3 left, and the fewer options you have, the more likely it is that with the guess, students can be successful. I thought this would be a good example for options that are all equally plausible. I got this question from a colleague here, yeah, so I have no idea whether this actually makes any sense, but what I'm trying to say here is that the answer options, the numbers, are quite close together. Yeah, so they're all equally plausible. They would all be possible. Yeah. And it's not that there's a very low number and a number that is far too high. Yeah. So that makes them equally plausible, equally attractive. Also keep in mind that students or the people oftentimes won't use, or definitely will rule out the lowest number and the highest number, and will go somewhere in the middle. Yeah? So it makes sense to have definitely more than 3 options, yeah, to make it more difficult. For example, and be mindful how you phrase the question and the items, because you ideally would want them to be correct, yeah, even when the answer has been selected. For example, here for you need to use your own words. For a summary, a paraphrase, or both. The correct answer is both, but then the sentence would be for both you need to use your own words, but both doesn't refer to anything. So the correct answer would actually be a wrong sentence. Is that something that you want? Probably not. Yeah, so I think we should aim at having correct sentences. Probably a better idea for this would be a drop-down menu where you have for a summary, for a paraphrase, for a summary, and a paraphrase. Yeah, and then they can select one of these options, and you would not have that issue. As the last thing to say about multiple choice, again, coming back to think about when designing questions, think about what do I want students to practice with this question? What do I want them to learn, or to think about? And also, is multiple choice really the best question type for your question? Because we sort of default to multiple choice, because we all know it, and it's easy, kind of, yeah. But for example, here, a question maybe for language learners about clothes and colors, yeah, that I think doesn't make any sense to design it like this. Yeah? So how many people in this picture wear yellow t-shirts? Why do you then have 8 answer options with the numbers? There's surely a better way of having that type of question. Okay, let's look at true or false, the sort of second favorite question type. And because they're so popular, and because they seem to be easy to write, and you just have to put something in and say, is that true or false? Yeah? But that's actually deceptive, because they're more difficult than you think to get right. And the problem, of course, is they're often not ideal for higher level questions. Yeah, so for the application and the transfer, that's oftentimes not ideal, or at least not easy to do. For example, here a summary is a brief statement or statements of the main points of the text. Yeah, obviously, it's not really difficult. Yeah, yes, of course, that's what it is. Yeah. For these true or false questions, also avoid ambiguity, and avoid trick questions and double negatives. So, for example, here, again, not my area of expertise, but for example, what often happens with true or false questions is if we just add in a negative, a negation, that will make it difficult, right? No, not really. It just makes it confusing. Yeah. So, for example, the first statement is true. Yeah, that might be too easy. The second statement is not true. That's probably also too easy, because if it says does not contain this, well, students will go, it doesn't. Yeah, that's obvious. So oftentimes we will think, to make it difficult, I'll just add 2 negatives in there. Yeah? So it does not contain less. Yeah, but that's just really confusing. Yeah? So again, surely there must be a better way of testing what students know about alkaline solutions. Yeah. Okay, let's look at matching. Yeah, I already mentioned that a couple of times. So matching is you have a drop-down menu and you have several items, and that's particularly good to categorize. Yeah, to categorize something. Yeah, so you've got several categories and you want students to match the categories. Yeah, you can also use that in language learning. You could use it for parts of words. So you have the first half of a word and the second half of the word, or you can use it for sentences, the first part of the sentence and the second part of the sentence. Right? And it's also great for steps and processes. Yeah? So you could on the left hand side there, you can write whatever you want. Yeah? So you could write words or steps or phrases or something. Yeah? And you could and then have the different in the drop-down menu what students are supposed to match. Yeah? So that's great for processes. A similar question type is the select the missing words. The difference is it's more flexible than matching because you can add it in as a whole text, yeah, and have basically gapped text with a drop-down menu. And yeah, again, you can use it for whole text or also for individual items. Yeah, but it's not as rigid with yeah, because you've got an editing window there. But otherwise, quite similar. Short answers. That's probably one of the more advanced options for quiz questions, and it's so to aim at the application and at the transfer level, yeah, of quiz questions. Because there are no answer options that students can choose from that would help them to jog their memory, but they actually have to generate that knowledge, from within. Yeah. For example, here you could ask what is the German word for university, and they would have to write that word. Yeah. And but the problem is with these short answers, they have to be really short because otherwise it's going to be really, really complex. Yeah. Yeah, for example, here, another good thing is that you can give partially correct answers, or you can accept correct answers. For example, here students would have to spell that with a capital letter, yeah, and you can tell them that's almost correct, yeah, so not wrong, yeah, but it's even more correct if you spell it with a capital letter, yeah, and you can add this in the feedback, yeah. You can tell Moodle whether or not to ignore capital letters. Yeah? For German, that would be actually quite important, yeah, but maybe for other subjects, it's not really important whether they spell it with a capital letter or not. Yeah? You can also use an asterisk as a wildcard, so as a replacement for something. Yeah? Here, for example, this name of this thing, of this chemistry thing, yeah, that I have nothing about. It's actually spelled originally with a Danish O. Yeah, obviously you can't expect students to find that letter. Yeah, so you can say just an O would be fine, or just any sort of letter where the O is would be fine. Yeah, and also whether or not to spell it with a hyphen, yeah, would also be fine. Yeah, so you can that would look like this. Yeah, so you can tell Moodle where to have the wildcards, so where to have the where to have the the asterisks. Yeah, then Moodle is flexible, and you can again give different different grades. Yeah, so partially correct answers, for example. Yeah. But let's look back at this. What's difficult about these short answers, is that you have to anticipate all the possible answer options, yeah, that students might have to come up with. And that's why I'm saying it has to be very focused. And what you want students to write in there has to be very focused and very clear, so so that the answer options that you anticipate don't get too complex. There's a numerical version of this as well. Yeah, so it's similar to short answers, just with numbers. And for all of you who teach numbers-based subjects or sciences, the numerical answers then can have an accepted error. So you can have a span, a range of answers that Moodle will accept. Yeah. And again, you can give different partially correct answers. Yes, you can say this answer is 100% correct and this answer will get partial points, and then you can give feedback. Yeah, because you sort of anticipate that a student might give that answer because they were thinking something, and then you can put in the feedback, oh, I know what you did here, but this is not quite correct because it's almost correct, but not quite correct. Yeah, so that's also in terms of giving feedback, actually meaningful feedback to students in an online environment. That's actually really handy. There are a couple more calculation-based question types that have slight differences that I don't know enough about that I want to talk about this. So I just thought I'd give you a resource here. So these calculated, multi-choice, and so on and so on. Yeah, so if you work with numbers, then maybe have a look at this. It's actually really well explained. Yeah. Another question type is close. It's called close. So this is a gap text basically. Yeah? And it's great for especially for language learning or for anything sort of text based where specific bits of information or parts of words or pieces of information are missing. Yeah. You can also program, or you can also have it as a drop-down menu, or you can have numbers as well, and you can have several different answer options as well. But it's actually really tricky to write. Yeah, as you can see here, the screenshot. So you have to refer to a page that tells you what the actual code is that you need to put in there. So these squiggly brackets and so on. So it's not easy, but especially for language learning, that's actually really handy. But again, the problem stays the same as with the short answers. You have to anticipate all possible options that students might give you. And you also have to take into account sort of typos and variations. For example, here, I think it was not airways, but airway was the answer that I put in. And it was defibrillation, not defibrillator. Even though the airways and defibrillator would be entirely acceptable answers and correct answers, but since when programming this or writing this, didn't anticipate that this is what students might come up with, it's not correct. For close questions, also consider whether, pretty much like every question, but consider whether students have enough context to understand what they're supposed to be doing and enough context to solve the task, and how ambiguous it is. Yeah? So for example, again, from chemistry here, there's a sentence with 2 gaps, and you might think, as the teacher, oh, that's obvious what's missing, yeah? But a student might not. Yeah? So what's missing here is two words each. Yeah? So probably to make this clearer and less ambiguous would be to give a clear instruction, what they should do to read it and put in the missing words. Yeah? And also have just the differentiating word that they have to put in. So they just have to put in weak and strong. They don't have to put in acid, for example. Yeah, because remember that students can't mind read. Yeah. So there are drag and drop. So that's I think the last type of question that I'm going to talk about. They're actually quite fancy and they always look great. Again, not easy to program, but they might be worth it. You can have drag and drop, so there are items that students have to pick and then drag into the correct gap, or in the correct place. You can do this for texts, although considering how difficult that is to program, I always wonder why bother? Why not make it a close? Yeah, so or a drop-down menu thing. Yeah, that's much easier. Yeah, but where this definitely plays a role is for anything that's visual. Yeah, so for example, here, map of Australia, where they have to label the different states. Yeah, that's visual and that's great with drag and drop. Yeah, and there are different types, so you can drag and drop into specific areas in the image, or you can also drag and drop without telling them where they should drag and drop it. Yeah, so maybe, for example, here, I think that's a map or something, and they have to label that. Yeah, but you're not showing them. So here, you're showing them where the things are that they're supposed to label. Here, you're showing them, or you're not showing them that. They just have to find that themselves in the image. Yeah. Also not easy to program, but definitely worth it, I would say, for anything that's sort of visual. There are the examples I didn't create myself, but they're from the Moodle documentation, so there are hyperlinks there that you can access to check that out. So that's all the quiz question types that I'm going to talk about today. So a little bit of, I thought, sort of food for thought and maybe a bit of a discussion thing. So how do we design, so seeing that these are sort of the main question types that we have, how do we design quiz questions at a higher level? So at the mastery, at the application level. So quiz questions that are not just memorization questions. For example, and I had a bit of a nosy around materials, so assignment materials, and there might be, for example, questions at higher levels that would ask students to compare and contrast something, or to explain something, to summarize something, to describe the steps, and to maybe describe something and then argue for or against something. What do we do with that? It's a genuine question that puzzles me as well. With this thinking that we shouldn't just create memorization questions, but we should aim at the higher levels of learning, of understanding. But how do we do that? And what I came up with, or my thinking was, well, I think we have to remember that there's a difference between formative and summative assessments. So probably, or maybe formative assessments, so the quizzes, are not the right place to ask students to do that, to ask students to compare and contrast something in writing, but that's probably something for a summative assessment, for an assignment. So anything that where students would need individualized feedback, would be a bit more difficult, but I think we can still prep them for these tasks, with multiple choice questions or with the Moodle quiz questions. I think it comes down to that in an online format with automated feedback, where we can't provide individualized feedback like in an assignment, it's just a bit more limited, and we have to, I guess, get a bit more creative. Right, before we do something practical, any questions or any comments?
Education is the key to a bright future.